Hi there, and welcome to another episode of eCom at One. Today's guest is Tim Mawson, Head of Partnerships at Salesfire. How are you doing, Tim?
I'm doing very well, Richard. Thank you very much for having me on this Wednesday morning. Really appreciate the time taken, obviously, to come on, and looking forward to it.
I am looking forward to it too. Obviously, heard so much about the brand, and I know a lot of our clients use your services and whatnot. So I'm really looking forward to finding out more. And I think it'd be good to kick off. Tell us a bit about yourself, how you got into sort of the e-commerce space, and then a little bit about Salesfire and what they do.
Yeah, let's go for it then. So it's actually quite weird. So I've been with the company about 4 years now, but the chap who was our head of marketing at the time, basically I was working in sales for another company, and I rang up trying to sell them my wares at that company. And essentially the chap who was head of marketing, as I say, turned around and said, basically, we should hire him to the CEO. So I ended up in e-commerce on the back of working in recruitment via a call trying to sell someone that. And as I say, since then, we've not really looked back. We've been going around about 5 years, based up, as you can probably tell by my delicious accent, in the northeast of England, Middlesbrough to be precise. In that time, it's kind of interesting as well. We've evolved from being a singular product system into a system where we've got 6 products within it. So it's become a lot more comprehensive for e-com retailers, and something that, as I say, we like to see develop more and more through the years, I suppose.
Yeah, brilliant. So 4 years in the space then, or 4 years in e-commerce. Gone from recruitment to e-commerce sales. I think it's surprising actually how many people we speak to that are in recruitment. I think they are a certain breed, aren't they? The salespeople in recruitment, they are pretty good, but a lot of them. Or there's other words I've used I've heard to describe recruitment salespeople, but maybe not for the podcast today. But
keep PG-13, please. But I think it gives you that sort of level grounding almost. You understand that recruitment is a really hard game, but when you come to e-commerce, you find that a lot of people want your stuff or want your product. They want a re-platform. They want SEO, PPC to work better for them. And then it becomes that sort of smoother transition almost, where you can sit down and go, oh, cool, that's how we do that. Easy, thank you very much. I'll stay in this space.
Yeah, so let's get into it then. So I think, what would be the best word to describe personalized experience, personalizing the experience of a user on a website? How important is that now in this day and age? Our listeners, e-commerce store owners of a certain size, how important is it that they are using some form of personalization on their store? Maybe give us some examples of some of the things they should be doing.
Yeah, 100%. I think there's a lot of stuff that, personally, there's stuff that we don't do within the company that I think is still, obviously invaluable for retailers to look at. But the best way I can put this is, if you go into, for example, I was in Holland and Barrett yesterday, and you walk in there, and the second you go in, somebody's asking you, right, do you know what you're looking for, number one? Do you know what would benefit your specific ailment if you have one, or what sort of area do you want to be in? And that level of customer service is something that e-commerce is getting really strong at the present. And you're looking at it, and there's tools like chatbots, there's tools like product recommendations, dynamic content, and even things like search bars where you could literally put in, I have, I don't know, an upset tummy or something like that, and it'll go, right, we recommend X, Y, Z for that. That's how it works. And I think that retail, customers as well, it's not so much for the younger generation, I'd say for people, when the specific example I always give is my father. So if he goes on a website, he 9 times out of 10 doesn't know what's running it, doesn't know what's going on behind the scenes, and yada, yada, yada. But he would go on and go, this is a problem I have, how do I fix this? If he's like B&Q or something. And having that sort of real world example where someone can turn around and guide you through the process and go, this is where you go, this is what you want, and these are other bits that will help you achieve that, to upsell the customer along the way, I personally think is invaluable. And I think when you look at, as you mentioned, certain size retailers have obviously been doing it for a while. Other retailers maybe starting out, or I don't know, in the sort of £1 million region for annual turnover, are probably starting to explore this. It's key for them to sort of get a grasp of it and understand how customers are behaving and what they'd like.
So let's say, we've got £1 million-ish turnover company listening now. Where would they start? What's some of the functionality, some of the experiences they should be looking to implement to give an initial personalized experience?
I think the best way of looking at this first and foremost is, when you land on a website automatically, and again, if you don't know what you're looking for, if you do know what you're looking for, the first part that customers will tend to look at is the search bar. Now, if your search bar is, I don't know, a native platform one, they tend to not be the best of breed, and it tends to not deliver either the results in the time you'd like, or maybe it's not the aesthetic you're going for with the site that you paid thousands of pounds for.
Yeah.
That's the first part. And then being able to customize results in there and make sure that customers are seeing exactly what they want is the second part, and making sure that you can get that information across is pivotal, 100%.
Yeah.
The next step as well is when that customer lands on a specific product page and you're looking at it there, and you've, I don't know, the best way I can think of describing it again is that in-store experience where a customer will go, right, okay, you've bought this set of weights on a gym site. Now, have you looked at resistance bands? Have you thought about this?
Yeah.
Like, what are you going to do to kit out like your home workout gym as we saw in lockdown?
Yeah.
That's the big part for me, is making sure that you're actually providing not just a website people can buy off, but an actual service at the same time.
Yeah, I think, that's brilliant. I think the guys will be listening and thinking, well, that sounds quite obvious. I think, okay, we're going here. We know that a tool or a system would then know that we've bought X, Y, Z, recommending other things, but it's not always that straightforward, is it? There are challenges trying to implement things like that. What are some of the challenges our listeners, they may be thinking, oh, we can't do that because of a limitation with technology, or we can't do that because we haven't got a technical person, or obviously things have moved on quite considerably. But what are some of the biggest challenges, and what are the sort of the ways around them, or a different way of thinking to look at that particular challenge to sort of push through it?
Completely, like as you say, it's something, as you say, in that specific example we're talking about now, where you're at that £1 million level, you could well be a husband and wife business still at this point with like a couple of people in a warehouse.
Yeah.
And again, a dev is not going to be your priority because you paid like dev. Let's be honest, dev wages are quite high, and employing one for yourself or a freelancer can be quite tricky. So yeah, I'd say first and foremost, the sort of way you look at, as you say, developing this out and making sure you can really sort of attain what you want is, I know this sounds really straightforward again, but it all comes down to the analytics side of things. And if your analytics isn't wired up correctly, or you're not seeing the data that you need to provide those decisions, then that's where a problem really kicks in. And you can't make a decision without having data to go, right, okay, this is this.
Yeah.
When, as you say, you're looking at issues in regards to integration being the big one. What we see tends to be integration, where they have to send off and it'll be 2 weeks because Bob the freelancer's in his garage, like the time to do it. If they're on like a bespoke platform, but if you're on a big commerce or something like that, you have so many options now within the space where you can start off on like a free tier product that is a one-click integration to go, right, we can actually monitor where people are going, be it like a heat map side of thing as well, that then feeds into that personalization element, I suppose, is where I'm going with this. So not necessarily just diving straight in, but making the data accessible and readable, so you can sit there and go, right, there you go, this is our problem, let's fix it there.
Yeah. No, I love it. So we've got to get the data right in the first place, and I think that's whether that's Google Analytics or a other platform. But I think quite often you go into a GA account, for example, and the code was maybe put on there the day they started, but then nothing's enabled. There's no exclusions. There's no e-commerce specific tracking set up. And you actually conversion tracking isn't working. That's surprisingly, I wouldn't say rare, because it isn't rare at all. Actually, we've had instances of people spending £1 million a month with no tracking. That we're aware of, that have come to us. And we're aware of people that are spending, high street brands that have spent way more than that, and tracking doesn't work. It's just like, wow. And obviously that's another level, slight sort of tangent, but ultimately if your tracking's not working, you can't layer in then another technology potentially, or if it's relying on that, you can't, to then to give you actions, to give you some next steps. So yeah, getting that right is invaluable. So I think a lot of our listeners also are retailers as well as e-com store owners. They're quite a lot of our, I did a talk last week to a brand that's got 230 stores, but they also have e-commerce. Mm-hmm. So, what would you say about trying to deliver personalization and user experience to those that have got stores, but they've also got this e-commerce? How can they trying to really tighten this omni-channel bridge between the two? It's something I'm quite really interested in at the moment. We're having a lot of sort of high-level conversations with big brands that have got a lot of stores, not 1 or 2 or 3 stores. And obviously we've got a lot of listeners that have got a lot of stores, but they've obviously got this e-commerce piece. What would you say about trying to have that seamless personalization across store and ecom?
Yeah, so I think this is something that, as you mentioned, this is what I would class as like the upper echelon of personalization, where you look at it, and obviously, as we mentioned, you can do bits on your store. When you look at omnichannel as well, like the standard example that comes to my mind is how people would deal with it on Amazon and eBay, if you're selling through those. And then you've got your main channel, well, hopefully your main channel is your website. What you're talking about there, Richard, is something where one of the examples that I really like for this is when you look at things like Klarna and how that changes from being not just on like a marketplace as well, such as Etsy or whatnot, on your website, and you can also do it in store.
Yeah.
That whole experience feeds that whole customer ideology where you want everything to be seamless. You want it to be as quick as possible.
Yeah.
You want to have flexibility. Now, if you look at that as a payment option, again, there'll be some people who use Klarna, some people who don't, and some people who use other buy now, pay later methods. But just seeing the way that you can scan a QR code in a store to access your Klarna account and purchase something, genuinely, I think, again, for a younger generation of shopper, is not a problem. Yeah. But I think if you were, like, for example, going into, I don't know, like a shoe shop where your average audience is like 40 plus,
yeah,
I think that might be different. And I think that level of personalization and seeing what customers want depends on your target market first and foremost. If you can outline who's going to be who's your most common customer, what sort of demographic they are, is it male or female as well, or any other gender for that matter? Like, what else is out there to basically get your customer feeling as involved? I think another great example that I came across was, so during the pandemic was basically, I think it was ShipStation were doing it, whereby you could order from Matalan online, and then they would have the item in your local store, and then you could go pick it up from the store on the door. And that sort of thing is a real sort of clever use of how to do like something that would be derelict otherwise, I suppose, during a pandemic.
Yeah.
So I think there's different facets for different companies, but the omni-channel experience is something whereby if you can sort of, again, you can tell I'm a big data nerd, and this is the sort of thing where I sit there, look at it, and I'm like, oh, that's cool, pair that together and see what happens.
Yeah.
But utilising that level of data on your customers, using loyalty schemes and such that you can transfer from online to in-store, build that picture of where your customer is and what they do and how it works, and that's where you can fuel the rest of your decisions.
Yeah, love it. I think QR codes is an interesting one because they almost sort of disappeared, I think, like a few years ago. They came out and then they disappeared, and then they're having a massive resurgence, I think, and because, well, especially like going into restaurants recently and bars, you scan your QR code, you get your menu up, and obviously you're ordering. Mm-hmm. I at first I was like, oh man, I just want to speak to somebody, order my drink or my whatever it is. Then I went to a restaurant a few weeks, this is like at the start when we opened back up, what was it, 3 months ago?
Yeah.
And scanned the QR code, ordered my drinks. And I set a timer on my phone. I'll see how long this takes. And it was like 57 seconds. And I had a drink at my table. I was like, oh my God, this is insane. So I finished my pint of lager with a friend of mine. Then I thought, right, let's do another one, and we said to the waitress, blimey, that was quick. And she was like, oh, to be honest, she says, that was slow. Normally we're a bit quicker than that. I was like, right. So we ordered another drink, and lo and behold, it was like 50 seconds. I was like, flipping heck. So then we ordered another drink, and each time it became a bit of a thing with the waitress sort of thing, where it was like 45 seconds from pressing pay to having a fresh pint of IPA on the table, which was like, wow. So, I've like got a sort of a fresh love for QR codes, not just because I like to drink the odd pint of beer, but just that speed. And, but also I think, you walk into a retailer, you're scanning that QR code, and you're looking then at the product page of that jacket, that coat, that hat, whatever it may be, whatever it may be, we are seeing more of that. And I think that's something that, I genuinely believe is, we are going to see a lot more of that. So people are getting that full omnichannel experience. They're going to the web page in effect, or a version of the web page for in store, where there's a lot more details about the brand. I think there's a real angle for people that are this sort of homegrown, local. If you walk into a store, you scan the the bag of potatoes, and it brings up a picture of the farmers in the field, and the history behind the farm and that local produce. And when you think about maybe some of the smaller retailers as well, when they're selling products from around like that locality, They're supporting that town, that city with 20 different smaller independents selling it in a farm shop, for example, or you're aware of where your products come from. I think that's really powerful. So I think that's great. I think we should go talk about data. You've touched on data. And I think obviously we're massive data fans here in our agency. They're obviously eCom One agency. So data and personalization. I think how important is that? And give us some insight into sort of what you've been doing with data.
Yeah, so essentially where my love affair started with this, and it's only really recent, I would say, it was literally at the turn of the pandemic. And what we as a company decided to do was basically create a tool whereby we would anonymize our customers' data, so our clients' data, our retailers' data, and put it into something that we call Trend Desk, essentially. And what that tool can do is then break down per sector the average conversion rate, the average spend, the average traffic coming to a website, what percentage it's up or down depending on the day. It's almost like a NASDAQ for e-commerce, I'd describe it as.
Yeah.
And that tool in itself is something where when you're looking at certain transitions, obviously around this time of year, it's kind of a bit different because traffic's inflated due to, I daren't say it because I'll probably break out in a sweat, but that sort of level of being able to analyze your spend, like what customers are spending on your site if you're in a high, like, I don't know, like a high ticket fashion, for example, or home furniture.
Yeah.
And you can analyze that and go, right, okay, our average spend's down. Why is that? How can we, again, funnel that back into our process? Is it something where our free delivery barrier is enabling people to get away with spending less for getting free delivery? Is it something whereby if we did a tiered sort of discount structure, if you spend 500 quid, you'll get 5% off versus if you spend below that, you'll get nothing? It's that sort of tool where you can turn around and go, right, okay, so this is how, again, we find more insight in the overall market, and more insight into what other retailers are doing specifically, but how they are performing, if you catch my drift. So that's the idea with that. And again, the sort of way I've looked at this as well is when you take a look over specific. So I'm quite big into my affiliate marketing side of things. Like I quite enjoy just looking around it and seeing what's going on. In that space, there's a lot of really cool things where you can look at it and see how your website is performing in your specific sector again. So very similar. And also what tech providers are performing well in certain sectors. So then as a business, you can turn around and make that evaluation and go, oh, in toys and games or whatever, this company ranks #1 for what they do. I wonder why that is. Can we spark up a conversation and see what's going on? And that, again, just makes retailers perform with that level of insight that they may not have had before, they may not have had time to look at. And that's where I think
I love that. It's a bit like the agency, when you're looking at SEO, it's people that are obviously doing better than you or whoever you are listening, and ultimately there's a lot of data there. There's a reason why those people are ranking. There's a reason why, they've been spending £1 million a month on ads, and there's a reason why they're doing X, Y, Z. So what you're saying is obviously look at that, combination of transactional data, whether that's or whether that's they've got site search, they've got this, they've got discounts, they've got loyalty program, they've got this. So you're aggregating that data from your clients in each industry and sub industries, verticals, and then you could go in as somebody in the fashion industry and go, actually, our average basket is a lot lower than them, and our retention and our rebuy is lower than them. We don't have a loyalty scheme. We don't do discount based on volume. We haven't got this. And then you end up with, I think it's what you're saying, sort of a hit list of things that then you actually, we are behind these guys. We don't know who they are exactly, because obviously that's confidential and whatnot, but we know that we're maybe here in the industry where we could be if we implement this, and that's where your software comes in, and you can sort of layer in various tests, whether that's, what would be the #1 thing where you think that most retailers are not doing? If you were to go right to a retailer now or an e-com store now, what's the one thing that every time you speak to a retailer, it's like, so for us, it might be, we go and look, it's like, you haven't got tracking on, or you're not running this type of ad. You're not doing remarketing, flipping it, what's the one thing normally that is a bit of you're not, straight away you're going to add 2, 3, 4, 5%. What would it be?
The easiest one straight away for me is, so within our system, we have a specific trigger for an overlay. And it's something where if you've ever shopped on Currys or AO.com, you'll see them do it. And I think it's a really smart way of doing things. So naturally, the example I give from Currys is, say I'm looking at a MacBook Pro or something like that, and you know fine well that they are not the only people on the web who stock it, like Apple themselves do it, there's everybody else. What I would then do as a customer is go on said product and try and highlight the product title to basically go, right, I'm going to bang this in Google and see where else.
Copy and paste it, Google it, find a better price maybe.
Exactly. Or if it's not based on price, is it based on your Trustpilot score? Is it based on your, I don't know, returns policy? Or do you have better payment options? Whatever it may be.
Yeah.
One of the big things we see, especially in, as I say, branded clothing, electronics, that sort of job, is that customers do that more frequently than you could ever imagine. Like it's literally not every time, because that's ridiculous, but I'd probably say about 6 times out of 10 people are performing that action.
Yeah.
And if you can just literally flash up a message when somebody highlights the product title and go, hang about, do you want to speak to one of our experts in store? Again, creating that omni-channel experience.
Yeah.
So they speak to Brian behind the desk who's been selling it for 20 years or something, and go, right, this is why you should buy from us, because we'll give you X, Y, Z, and you'll get a carry case for it or something like that as well, if you buy it, rather than going to a giant like Currys or something.
Yeah.
And again, that's one of the big things we look at, and I think that's probably where, leading on from that as well, I don't know if you use this in like your day-to-day as well, Richard, but like heat maps and that sort of job.
Yeah, we do, yeah.
Yeah, I think personally, I used to think it was sort of a vanity tool, so you could just see if people were engaging with your website correctly and basically clicking on certain categories and which ones were getting ignored. But more and more you look at this side of things and you go, hang about, that customer has bounced off there, they've scrolled down to the payment options and they've gone, right, you don't have what I want, or they've performed this action. How do we then develop something into this system to make it more inclusive of everyone?
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. I love the fact, I'm sitting here thinking, I copy, drop, paste, people, price is obviously a big factor, but it's not the only factor, and when you need that little nudge, maybe, as a customer, that little nudge just to go, oh, £5 is not the end of the world. If it's obviously depending on if it's a £10 product, it is, but if it's a £200 product, everyone's between 190 and 210. Price maybe is not all that for most people, I would say. But obviously, if you're getting that, what seems personalized touch, hey, this is John, a little picture of John in the corner, like you say, going, oh, well, we're actually giving away a free bag or whatever it may be, or free, or just generally to be able to have a chat and just sort of confirm that, we've got them in stock, we can have this to you tomorrow. I think that's brilliant, that little touch point. So a little overlay. I think, that you don't see, not that often. So there's obviously a lot of customers out there for you still.
The interesting part though is, so again, you'll probably come across this as well, where you speak to a retailer and say they're a small, like what I would describe as like a small fast fashion company. And the start of the conversation always seems to go something like, right, we want to be like Boohoo. And it's like, right, what you need to do first and foremost is you don't have the capital that they have. So ignore that end goal for now and turn around and go, right, how can we sort of set a precedent of how we want to move forward? And that's the difficulty, is like calming somebody down to a point and going, right, slow down, take a look, evaluate, and then come back and go, this is where your customers are going, this is what they're doing, this is your problem.
Yeah, love it. So on that similar vein then, maybe give us an example of a store. If you can mention the name, fine. If not, it's okay not to, but with the sort of talk us through the project. So you've taken on a client and you've then layered in, the overlay maybe, and various tools and and different triggers. And obviously just run us through, if an eCom store's sitting here, maybe they've, I don't know, they're doing 5-10 million quid, and they're maybe not doing too much on personalization. Talk to those guys and think, right, this is an example of what we've done, and how that's worked in the real world.
Yeah, so I think, again, it's quite an interesting one, because it was, again, bringing it back to the lockdown. I hate doing this, but obviously we know that cycling went mad as an industry. And people were going hell for leather because they wanted to get out on bikes. And these people are maniacs, by the way, who do like 40 kilometers on a weekend. Like, I don't know where you're getting the time. But I can't mention the specific client name. But for this example of a client, the first thing we did, they got in touch with us last year, basically mentioned that their site navigation needed a bit of a tweak. The first way we looked at doing this was via site search. And what we'd look to do was implement the site search. Now, what we have in behind that is within our dashboard, you can see the sort of mechanisms on how much customer spend has improved per basket, how much conversion rates improved, and what search terms are basically trending, if you will. So one of the really key parts is they've basically taken the data that's in our dashboard now, and they can see in month on month what sort of search terms were trending, what people were looking for. Yeah. Is it like winter cycling jackets now or something like that? I don't know. But back in summer, was it like lightweight jackets? So then you merchandise your search effectively to get customers to where they probably want to be in the first place. If I'm typing in that, then I'm going to show like this sort of range first because it's the most common one, or it's a big brand, something like that.
Yeah.
And over the course of that, we noticed that just by people engaging directly with the search, I've got the figure here, it was something like the overall conversion rate per search term was something like 27% because they were merchandising it specifically to them. Yeah. So for every search of that ability, job done, perfect. And what we like to operate as a company is not throwing every service at someone straight away, because then you can't really like measure increments on it.
Yeah.
The next pop-out was basically we laid in the overlays recently. And one of the stats we've had by this is, and I was quite amazed by this to be fair. So it was over the course of the last month, for orders that weren't influenced by Salesfire, their order value was £129, which isn't too shabby, I suppose. I don't know in the bike industry, obviously, if you're buying a high-end bike, that's probably not too good. But the orders influenced by Salesfire were at £332. So it's sort of jump where, again, just providing people like customer service and going, there we are.
That's huge, isn't it? It's like 200 and whatever, 250%. And obviously, majority of those won't be buying a bike, they'll be buying bits to go with it, whether that's the, I was one, I'm guilty, I bought a bike during lockdown. Obviously it's still wrapped up in the garage, not been out yet, but no, it has, but it hasn't done too many miles, but not a race bike, but a road bike, a mountain bike, but that's brilliant. That's really, yeah. So we're looking at that navigation, we're looking at site search, we're layering in overlays. I think the key there is that, as you said, like any sort of A/B UX changes, is sort of one thing at a time, get data, make decisions, finalized, right, yes, no, it's working. Obviously, majority of the times, obviously the things that you're recommending are proven through thousands of stores and hundreds and thousands of customers. So you know that if somebody's not got a site search and the navigation is not doing this, or it's not laid out in a certain way, you've got a very strong indicators in industries what's going to work. So you can layer in, number one, worked, but obviously you guys knew and know it's very likely to work, if not definitely going to work, because they've got no site search to start with, or they've got no dynamic site search to start with, or they've got poor plugin site search potentially, or a standard, out of the box one that maybe hasn't got X, Y, Z. That's brilliant. Any other sort of maybe anything else a bit more advanced on UX that, or personalization that you've got a good example of recently?
Yes. So it's our brand spanking new tool basically. And it's something whereby I've only ever seen one other company in the world currently do it, I think it is. Apart from people who've self-built it, obviously, because they've got mad level dev team and can afford to do that. And it's what we call at this end visually similar search. So it is literally probably the most Ron Seal of tools you've ever heard of. So for example, I'm on a fashion website now and I'm on the product page looking at this shirt, for example, blue checky. I could basically go down, look at the sizings and see that they don't have my large shirt in stock, sorry. So the next step for me would be going, I really like that pattern. That would go nice with my outfit. How do I see more of this product? Now, you could do that through recommendations, but what we've developed at this end is a tool whereby there's a button that sits just below like the add to basket, that sort of job. And you can click that. And then what it will do is it will drag you up every other product on the site that looks similar to it. Now, we've seen, again, this is something where it's early adaptations of it and it's really relatively new. I think Facebook and Pinterest are launching something similar in Instagram as well.
Yeah.
But where we're seeing this on eCom sites, it's few and far between. The idea with the visually similar is that what we are building from this is if somebody, for example, in the shirt example I've just given, isn't finding what they want in their size, they may then find another shirt that's slightly more expensive, but it is in their size and they can get it tomorrow. So it's naturally upselling people like that.
Yeah.
Which is a really interesting way to look at things as well from your perspective.
I'm a bit of a shirt fanatic, to be honest. That's my go-to. Nice shirt, pair of jeans. And absolutely, you go on these fashion stores and, I'm a double XL kind of guy. There's so many that just rings a bell to me straight away. Obviously if you go on and you look at one double XL, there's no point showing me when I go to the next, I do another search and then showing me, the smalls. Obviously the site should know that I'm looking at double XLs and only showing me the products that are in double XL. But obviously you're going a whole other level there where, if a double XL in a certain style, color isn't in stock, you'll then the ability to then search for similar style and color, which is hard to define in a navigation, isn't it? Because obviously style, color, brand, size is probably the normal go-to. But then, by scanning an image potentially and looking at similar pattern, that's great. Love it. Fashion, I think it's just such an important one, because obviously what you're also trying to do is reduce that back-end cost, returns, which that should possibly, help with. Brilliant. So obviously work with a lot of retailers. What's some of the biggest mistakes that you see on personalization or trying to get going on personalization, or just biggest mistakes in general that our listeners should avoid?
I think it depends on what you've got as a piece of kit. I think, as you say, there's many pieces of kit out there now that are super advanced, and you can pretty much tailor it by the weather outside in a person's location and whatnot, and it becomes a bit Black Mirror at that point. I do think there's certain elements whereby you've probably seen it yourself as well, Richard, where you go on a site and it'll be like, I don't know, like say I'm looking at a pair of headphones or something, and it'll be like, in the bottom left corner, it'll pop up and it'll say, so-and-so in Lithuania has just bought this or something like that. You're looking at that and it's like, that's cool that somebody's buying the product, but that is also probably not relevant to me at that point. So I'm going a bit like, And again, coming back to that demographic piece, like if, again, I'm going to use my dad, Neil, probably, if he ever listens to this, he's furious. If he saw that, he'd probably turn around and go, again, completely irrelevant. And again, if he went on the site and he wasn't logged in and it had recognized his IP or something like that, and he was like, hi, I'm Drew, like, this is what you were looking at last time, blah, 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 he might be a bit turned off by that sort of tracking element as well. So not necessarily a do and a don't, if you will. It's just that sort of, if you're going to do it, sort of take your time to measure what you're doing again and look at the overall aspect.
I think some of those tools can be slightly, I don't know what the word is, but I think, such and such bought this product from such and such. Well, a lot of the time, from what I've seen, some of those tools are not true in effect. They are there to try and people know that, I think in reality. So it's like, well, you're not starting that relationship very well, are you? You're basically saying that 15 people bought this product in the last 10 minutes. Hang on a minute, did they really? And obviously that's no way to go on. That's no way to build your brand, start a relationship. I think there's been a raft of products like that launched in the last, couple of years, sort of but product launch websites that launch these products for, one-off fees and whatnot. Obviously there's mileage to encourage people to buy. Absolutely. But as long as I think personally, if it's genuine data,
100% agree. And I think, like, again, just to come back to your point about do's and don'ts, the big thing that we notice is, as well, from our end, again, coming back to the out of stock element, and it's something that's quite, I wouldn't class it quite serious. It's just something that is a bit weird to do. So you might have native recommendations from your platform, and say you're on a product page and 2 of those recommendation slots you were going to fill have sold out. Then what your native recommendations might not do is refill those other slots. So you've just got 2 blank slots that look pointless on your website and just leave a gap that you could have other products in there to backfill it and say, right, this is something else you can look at. And giving that opportunity to the customer is key. That's what we're trying to do. And if you give someone the license, it's likely they'll buy. Like, there you go. So again, just something like that, and just monitoring like the out of stock, like on recommendations in your search bar and whatnot, can be really pivotal in just getting a customer to a product they want. Yeah, brilliant. So crystal ball time.
Go on. Obviously, you guys are iterating, building, very progressive in the industry. It's well known, got a great reputation. So what would you say, if we're sat here 18 months from now, what's some of the new stuff that will be in terms of personalization, some of the things that may become quite standard for those more progressive e-commerce stores? What would you say? 18 months from now, we're sat here, what are we talking about?
I think that genuinely in 18 months, when we if I get the opportunity to come back, what we'll look to do is, I think, as standard across the board. So as mentioned, I've harped on today about site search recommendations, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
Next level for me in that sort of personalization journey is dynamic content, and being able to show people what they looked at last time and how they've things they would be interested in as standard.
Yeah.
I think what we will probably see is that next level from platforms. So they'll turn around and go, right, okay, you're on Magento Enterprise, or you're on a BigCommerce Enterprise, or whatever. This comes as standard for you. And I think that is a game changer for retailers across the board, where then they can sit down and go, we have this facility immediately, and we can see the results by getting more granular, and it's all AI based, all AI driven, giving the customer the license to then present stuff that is relevant to the customers as standard. I think that's where we go.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. And only yesterday I was reading about Netflix on the same vein. I would imagine most people that are listening have got a Netflix account, or but ultimately when you're on Netflix now and you're browsing through what to watch, and the example that I read about yesterday was Stranger Things, and obviously hugely popular show, one of the top 10, I believe. Mm-hmm. But basically what it's saying is that Netflix show a different thumbnail of that show to potential people that are going to watch that show based on what you've watched in the past. So obviously Stranger Things covers, it's like horror, it's a bit gory, it's a love story, it's it's sort of a teen, there's all sorts of angles potentially to cover a lot of demographics of listeners. So if Netflix know that you like watching love stories, for example, then they'll show you the thumbnail with the, there's a couple of different relationships in the show. If you like horrors, there's a definite horror sort of scare element to it. They show you the horror, and it showed you about 12 different thumbnails to cover off the 12 different profiles, personas of different people that watch different types of show. I thought that, and that's what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Obviously that's very, very progressive. That's insane, isn't it? You go into a store. If I'm looking at another purple shirt, it's showing them on a, it knows that I'm a certain size. It's showing you a picture of them on a bigger guy, or on a person potentially wearing jeans, because I like to wear the shirt with my jeans. It's very personalized, as opposed to maybe, brilliant. Love it.
Taking it back to that piece as well, it is literally, if you think about it, if you're a regular customer at, say, a local menswear shop, and you go in and they're like, all right, Richard, you're back again. Yeah, we've got more purple shirts over there.
Yeah.
Oh, you've got these jeans that you bought last time. There's a new range of them. Ta-da, have a look at those.
Yeah.
It's that sort of thing that, and I know it's a cheesy industry term, but it is literally replicating the in-store experience online. Yeah. And that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, love it. Right, we're coming to the end. I think it's very clear to me. You're very straight talking. Say it as it is, which I love. So if you were to give one bit of advice to our listeners, what would it be? Anything.
Yeah, the first point of contact, I think, is if you are looking at anything to develop your site, and if you've just got a site, it fits everyone really. I think the best way to look at it is keep it simple first and foremost. Do not dive in both feet and go, right, we're going to do everything now. Keep it simple, build on stuff, layer it out there. Because if you're throwing 6 pieces of tech at your website at once, big and free plugins and whatnot, that is just going to confuse matters, and it's not going to make everything crystal clear for where you want to go. That is the key part I would go to every time. Keep it simple, analyze, and then grow.
Brilliant. Well, thanks, Tim. It's been an absolute pleasure. That has flown by. I like to end every episode with a book recommendation. Do you have a book that you recommend to our listeners?
See, I'm going to be a bit edgy here, and being from the north, I can't really read. So what I tend to do is I don't, as I say, I haven't really read a book as such since school probably, which speaks volumes. But the thing that I'm really into at the minute, and it's a podcast specifically, so it fits the tune of this. Yeah. The big one is it's called the High Performance Podcast. And I know I sound like a cheesy sort of sales guy going, but the idea is it shows you how people have reached a certain level in their career, and it shows you the sort of things that they value. And that's what I've took a lot from recently as well.
Yeah, that's a brilliant recommendation. Thank you, Tim. So for the guys that want to find out more about you, more about Salesfire, what's the best way to do that?
Granted. So the best way is heading to our site. So it's www.salesfire.com. If you want to, as I say, have a read around there, see what's what, you can pop an inquiry and see where we're at. And failing that, you can always find me on LinkedIn because I'm all over that like a rush.
Yes.
So there you go.
Well, thanks, Tim. It's been an absolute pleasure. Absolute nuggets left, right, and centre there. I look forward to digesting a few bits there and talking to our team further about more of the functionality there that we need to focus on for our clients as well. So fantastic. Thank you so much. I'll see you again. And we'll see if your predictions come true in 18 months.
I'm telling you right now, they will. I'm putting a bet on for it straight away. Thank you very much.